Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of WPBS Weekly Inside the Stories. I'm Stefan Brunson. WPBS is proud to present a 4-part series this month addressing addiction prevention and treatment. In our first segment tonight, we look at what it takes to reduce the stigma associated with addiction, a dependency that knows no race, age, or religion. In a word, addiction does not discriminate. Produced by WPBS Director of Production, Tracy Duflo, this first segment shares 3 factors that can lead to addiction.
Alcohol or drug addiction, it's also known as substance use disorder. And it's really when a person develops a habit of using a specific substance. It becomes severe, or a severe substance use disorder, when that habit negatively impacts day-to-day living, things like relationships, school, work. And one way to think about it is when a person has a happy and healthy life, everything is balanced out, all of the pieces of their life. With addiction or substance use disorder, the drug use becomes the center of their life and everything else is secondary and suffers as a result. The habit that addiction is, it actually rewires our brain. It changes the way that our cells communicate with each other and how they process information. That rewiring causes us to make different types of decisions, often not as good of decisions.
Parts of our brains make up what we call the reward system. We get rewarded with good feelings when we do something we like, such as eating cookies or hanging out with friends. When we experience something enjoyable, our brain releases a reward, a chemical called dopamine.
And that tells us that this is positive, and it creates that positive feeling. When we do that with drugs, however, our bodies or our brains produce a much larger amount of dopamine, and it overwhelms our systems. Our brains then squash down the amount of dopamine that they're providing, so it is always trying to keep it at a normal level. And eventually, our bodies stop creating dopamine in the appropriate levels, and that's what causes us or causes a person to use more drugs, because they're always trying to get back to that positive feeling.
Drug and alcohol addiction doesn't discriminate. It can be a professional, it can be somebody who's homeless, it can be somebody with mental illness, somebody without mental illness. So it's really something that can impact anyone. So I think oftentimes there is a stigma around drug use and abuse, and I think that's part of the problem.
We do know that there are some factors that can maybe give us some better information about whether a person is prone to addiction. Part of that is genetic. So a person who comes from parents who have addiction problems are found to be about 60% more apt to become addicted later on in their life. Our environment is also a big factor. Just like if we grow up in a home where high-fat foods and junk food is the norm, then we're probably going to live that way when we grow older. It's the same with addiction. If there are drugs in the home growing up, there's a better chance that there will be drugs in the home when we're adults. And then the third factor has to do with the development of the brain. Our brains are really not fully developed until we're in our mid-20s, and drug use prior to that time can cause the rewiring of the brain to happen in a much bigger way, and it can impact people lifelong.
There's a lot of denial in addiction, in substance abuse. So oftentimes it's when it's been suggested to them. Oftentimes their family, their friends, their coworkers notice there's a problem before they do. But when you see it's affecting things like that, your family relationships, your work, your use increases, that's when we say it's time to discuss it with a healthcare professional.
The only part about addiction that's a choice is the first time that a person uses the alcohol or drugs. Once that happens and an addiction is starting to form, the person loses the ability to make that choice. And that's because their brains are literally changed. The communication between the cells, it's all rewired into a way that makes it so that our willpower is lessened. It's not as effective. We lose the ability to make that choice. Our brains tell us to use the substance because our brains are trying to protect us from the harm or hurt of withdrawal.
Some of the signs that you might be addicted are an increased tolerance to the substance, often thinking about the substance the next time you're able to use. It becomes everything that they are thinking of. Every move they make, there's drugs involved, there's alcohol involved, and they can't have any of their other daily living normal as they know it.
Addiction or substance use disorder is a chronic disease. It's no different than diabetes is a disease of the pancreas, or high blood pressure is a disease of the heart. Those are lifelong diseases that have to be treated appropriately throughout our lives.
If you or someone you know is suffering from addiction, help is available. No judgments, no guilt trips, just help, and happy to provide it. Contact one of the numbers or website on your screen.